The 2022 Tin Technology Industry Report shows tech's exports generated $11.5 billion in revenue this financial year, which is up 9.1% on the previous year. Joining me now is Greg Shanahan, who's the founder and managing director of the Technology Investment Network, which is behind the report. Well, welcome, Greg.
Hi Fiona, thanks for having me.
The report says tech companies grew 9 times faster than the general New Zealand economy in the past year. What do you think is driving that?
All sorts of things, but probably the two main things are the scale of the businesses now. So there's 30 businesses with revenues over 100 million, close to 60 with revenues over 50 million. So they're increasingly well-resourced and diversified globally. So I think that diversity across multiple markets, both in terms of industry and geography, is really helping.
So tech is now the country's second largest export earner. What's your prediction on when it will become number one?
Well, I would think that by 2030, who knows about the world, but certainly the trajectory for it is we have no expectation other than it will enjoy close to double-digit growth on an ongoing basis and probably double within the next 5 years.
Speaking of number one, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare once again topped the list with revenue of $1.68 billion and closely followed by its former sister company, Fisher & Paykel Appliances. And you've got 4 over $1 billion revenue now.
Yes.
Are those companies, as you say, just getting bigger and bigger as that sort of snowball effect?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to watch. You will have seen the media that Fisher & Paykel have bought a site in Karaka that's going to be 2.5 times bigger than Highbrook. So we've got this amazing monolith, which is a fantastic example, not only of best business practice, but as part of that working in their community as well.
Within the sectors of the tech market, which is moving the fastest?
Well, I guess it depends on how you judge it, but certainly in terms of percentage growth, ICT, fintech, obviously, communication solutions and creative industries were some of the highest in terms of percentage growth.
And health tech's another one?
Absolutely. So health tech came off its peak last year, primarily because of of Fisher & Paykel's performance. But nonetheless, their long-term performance has been incredible, and their profit results were fantastic. So, yeah, it's amazing to watch.
The report looks at employee numbers. I mean, how big a deal is the jobs created and what sort of wages they pay?
Thanks for asking that question, because I think it's under-recognised. So we estimate that the contribution in terms of new jobs this year was about 260 million in terms of new salaries coming into the economy. So it's having a massive impact, and I think that job growth of high-paid jobs, I think the average salary is something like $90,000, is making a huge difference to the domestic economy.
Obviously, everybody's complaining about labour shortages, so how's that affecting the tech industry?
I think it's just recently starting to ease up a little bit with current events, but in some ways, again, it sounds a bit Pollyanna, but it's a good thing because the tech sector is reaching out to underrepresented parts of the community to engage them in these opportunities. So that has a flow-on effect in terms of social inequity in the country.
And are they able to get offshore people they need to come in now?
That's starting to change. So one of the other things companies have been doing is employing people to work offshore or acquiring other companies which have those resources.
I wanted to touch on R&D spend because there's a lot of talk, and the government's been talking for a while about wanting to hit that target of 2%.
Yeah.
But the OECD average is 2.5. We're nowhere near that yet. But these companies show that you can make gains if you do spend on R&D?
Oh, absolutely. So the R&D growth was something like, I think, 19 or 17% up to about $1.8 billion. So it's trending upwards massively. I think the other thing to reflect on for R&D is that we probably have a more efficient R&D structure in terms of, it sounds parochial, but Kiwis can turn something around for $1 that it would cost $10 to do offshore.
What do you think will drive that more to get to the level that the government wants? Because it really has to come from the private sector rather than public, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And so we see for the fast growth companies like Xero or Fisher & Paykel Healthcare or Buckley Systems, they're outspending in terms of the percentage of revenue on R&D. So I think it's that and the performance in terms of productivity are happening naturally as we get larger and larger companies.
What are some of the standout companies for you on the list this year, and why?
I think there are a whole range of companies for different reasons. If you look at Rocket Labs as an example, so they're in our 10 companies to watch, so the first time to be on that list. And they, who would believe that we could have a space industry in New Zealand apart from, but for the imagination of someone like Peter Beck. And another exciting company just down the road is Rocketworks in terms of the gaming industries. That creative sector is are really going well. So I think if you want to grow, put Rocket into your company name and you'll do well.
Tech companies are big exporters. Where are the most important markets for these companies?
Yeah, so that's changing as well. So Australia is obviously the biggest, but I think it will soon be surpassed by the United States. So fantastic growth. But what we're seeing is that as companies get larger, the growth in tertiary markets is increasing. So Asia, for example, has turned over $1 billion for the first time. We're seeing growth in Latin America and Europe. So there's more diversity geographically for these companies, and so therefore that's why they're more resilient to the economic fluctuations.
The report includes a focus on rising stars, which you measure by companies that have sustained high growth in revenue over 3 years.
Yes.
And Xero sits at the top of that list.
Yes.
What have you identified as the key causes to the success of those rising stars?
Yeah, so a range of things. A business model is one, so recurring revenue, and so a service model, and then in the ICT space, software as a service, or Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, care and consumables. Culture, so they're obviously, as they're growing, they're employing more people, but they've developed an attractive culture. Investment is a key thing in terms of a large percentage of them are funded. And then R&D, obviously, so they're outspending in R&D, as we pointed out earlier.
On the investment side of things, tech stocks in the States are obviously down and things are getting a little bit tighter in terms of capital. What's your take on that in terms of funding the growth of these companies?
Yeah, so clearly early stage funding, anecdotally, is getting tighter in New Zealand, and I think there's kind of been a pause for people just to assess what's going on. But I think that will recover as people see that the tech sector continues to grow. The difference is that increasingly a large number of these companies are now profitable and self-sustaining, as opposed to stuff that's their balance sheet is pretty fragile. So I think the longer-term outlook for continued investment is strong.
This is the 18th year of the report.
Yeah.
What are the key changes you've seen over that past 18 years?
I guess 18 years ago it would be hard to imagine it would have been this big, and certainly not the second largest source of offshore revenue for the country. What we've seen is a growing maturity and a growing expertise. So we know how to build large companies. We know how to invest in R&D. And so we've got this sort of just fantastic engine for creating high growth businesses. So it's been pretty satisfying to see.
What are the hurdles they face, though? What could be headwinds they're facing?
In terms of headwinds, obviously the access to talent. So the borders have to open and to address that. And then the other one typically is capital. So getting capital into sort of high-risk ventures, and that's being addressed by democratisation of the investor base. So a broader number of people are investing in the tech sector than before. So if more Kiwis can invest in the sector, the economy will continue to grow. And finally, around that, as these companies get bigger, they're on the horizons of far larger sources of capital flowing around the globe.
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Greg Shanahan.
Thanks, Fiona.